I have been wanting this guest on our show for a long time. I met her almost a year ago, and it was one of the best cocktail parties, cocktail exchanges I've had because her story was so amazing, so unbelievable that you won't believe it. Please welcome the author of 37 Seconds, my friend, Stephanie Arnold, everybody. Hi, Stephanie. Okay. I have so much that I want to get to, and I know that your story, it's hard to condense. So let's get right to it. 37 Seconds, your book is the title comes from?
I flatlined. I was clinically dead for 37 seconds.
Yeah, exactly.
But I'm alive now.
Yeah. But the story, I'm not kidding, audience, when I say this. I was so captivated by your story. It's hard to condense, but if you can, no one believed you at first. You had premonitions.
I did. I was 20 weeks pregnant with our second child, so it wasn't my first time at the rodeo. And about the 20-week ultrasound, I was diagnosed with something that 1 in 200 pregnancies have, a placenta previa, which is basically the placenta growing on top of the uterus. From that moment, I started to have visions, and they were a reaction to these visions. It was happening viscerally. So I imagined, I had premonitions that the placenta was going to marry itself to the uterus, that I was going to hemorrhage, that I was going to need a hysterectomy, that the baby was going to be fine, that I was going to be put under general anesthesia, and that I was going to die on the operating table.
And you had these, and it affected basically every moment of your life because you were having this and you were unable to really talk about it with anybody. You didn't really want to.
I actually told every single person I saw. So if you saw me in a coffee shop and we didn't know each other and I was pregnant and you say, oh, how's it going? But I'm going to die. I told everybody. I posted on Facebook, if anybody has my blood type, I'm going to need it. I sent goodbye letters. I wrote goodbye letters. I told everybody what was going to happen. And then I told every single doctor and every nurse. So every visit, I would go see a nurse, ultrasound. At one point, I had an MRI to see if that uterus and the placenta was going to marry itself. And the MRI came out negative. I sought out specialists. And every single time I would say, this is going to happen. They were like, Mrs. Arnold, I think you need to rest. I think you're hormonal. I think you're...
The ladies. Did you hear?
Right.
Did you? Yeah. Cue the ladies. Yes.
Right. You're hormonal. You're pregnant. You're, all these things. And my husband, to his credit, my husband is a PhD economist from the University of Chicago. So he is a former Air Force pilot, very grounded, very data-driven, very analytical.
Smarty.
No,
He's a smarty. Yes.
Right. But what I was telling him, because the data was saying something else, didn't make sense to him. So for him, he was just trying to keep it under wraps. Be like, okay, let me help you through this. Let me just listen, because there's nothing else I can do.
And the doctors, were you how did you turn that frustration into action? I mean, were you, instead of just sitting there seething in the anger of no one believing you, no one hearing you, did you immediately turn that anger into action, or did that take a while of people not believing you?
It didn't matter that no one believed me. I knew that I said something, I needed to say something. So I kept at it. And it didn't matter if anybody was judging me or thinking I was crazy, because they already thought that. The only thing that I knew was, I don't know where it was coming from, but I knew 100% it was going to happen. And the only way I knew how to take action was to tell everybody until somebody heard me. And ultimately somebody did.
Okay. We're going to take a break. When we come back, the story continues, and just stay there. You are not going to believe it. We'll be back after this. More with Stephanie when we return. More with Stephanie Arnold, my friend. Her book is 37 Seconds. We'll tell you how to get it in a little bit. Okay, so take us to the day. So you've been writing goodbye letters. You've been telling everyone this is going to happen. Not even your doctors believed you.
So I ultimately had one consultation with anesthesia, and I told them, again, my crazy foreboding story. She's like, look, you're in a teaching hospital. I was at Northwestern, big hospital in Chicago. You're in good hands. And at the end of the day, I was like, she said she would always remember the last thing I said, which was, it is what it is. because I was done, So 36 weeks to the day, I was supposed to have a mandatory C-section at 37 weeks. So 36 weeks to the day, my husband's in New York and I'm in Chicago, and I start bleeding on the kitchen floor. Might be too much information for your audience, but there you go. So
it's the reality of the situation.
It is. So I tell my friend, and I have a daughter who's a year and a half at this point, and I put him in the car, and my friend gets in the driver's seat, and I said, get out, I'm driving. And she's like, are you crazy? I'm like, look, I've had lots of premonitions. Dying in a car accident wasn't one of them. So get out. So then we get to the hospital. They triage me. My husband is texting me on the computer, and I'm telling him my goodbyes, and he's still not getting it. He's like, where do I meet you? And I'm like, 8th floor recovery, hopefully. And my doctor comes in and says, it's time to go. I kiss my daughter a million times, and I'm trying to hold back the tears. The mother's instinct of like, I don't want the last thing she remembers me crying.
Yeah.
And so the doctor said, we'll be back with mommy and your brother soon. And as they gurney me out, I break down crying because I'm convinced it's the last time I'm going to see her. So then as we're going down, I'm telling my doctor, there's something wrong. You need to put me under general anesthesia. And she said, I just think you're nervous. Jonathan's not here. We'll take good care of you. I get into the OR, and I'm done. At the end of the day, I can't go anywhere. So I get wheeled into the operating room where we're going to give life to my son, and it's going to take mine. So they deliver Jacob, healthy and happy, and 3 seconds later, I'm dead.
3 seconds. And then what?
It's a soap opera, right?
I know. It's like, no, I got to tell you, audience, I've heard this story. This is how I was sitting. We were sitting with the only difference is I had a martini.
Right, exactly.
That's the only difference between.
He was like, and then?
I was like, and then? And then? I know, but.
So I flatline. They have a crash cart. They intubate me. They get me back up 37 seconds later. I ended up having an amniotic fluid embolism, which is a very rare 1 in 40,000 risk where amniotic cells get into the mother's bloodstream, and if you happen to be allergic to it, your body goes into anaphylactic shock, and in most cases, you don't make it. The only reason I am alive today is that one consultation I had after all of the doctors I spoke to, the phone consult with anesthesia, she said, it didn't sit right that she couldn't help me. And she said, I never heard a patient speak so clearly about what was about to happen to her, had a baby before, and sought out specialists to save her life. And with that one phone call, she flagged my file and incorporated extra blood in a crash cart in the operating room.
One phone call. One phone call did it. And that one person finally believed you.
Yeah.
One person, yeah. Now talk to us. This is the part. Now none of this is my favorite, but this is the part that when I tell your story secondhand, this is the part where I go, and you ain't gonna believe this. So
ultimately I had, so I was put in a medically induced coma. Jonathan arrives at the hospital. Everything is stable. And he says, if she needs a hysterectomy, this is the doctor we met with months before. So she's not going to need one. Don't worry about it. Hours later, shows that I'm still hemorrhaging. Your normal body has 20 units of blood. I was given 60 units of blood and blood product to save my life. And so they call in the doctor to perform the hysterectomy. And when they do the pathology on the uterus, it shows that the accreta had started to form this marriage between the placentas. So everything I had seen had come 100% true. Jonathan likes to joke with me and says, yeah, but I always believed you were going to survive, so you were wrong. So then I'm recovering, and everybody's like, what, did you see the light? What happened? Everything. And I'm like, I don't know. They gave me a lot of drugs, so I ultimately went to a regression therapist. And regression therapy uses hypnotherapy to take you back into the moments of trauma, and almost like an observer. And I videotaped that therapy.
And when we come back, you're going to hear about, and we're going to show you a little bit of the video from the regression therapy. Don't you touch that dial. We will be right back, everybody. More Stephanie. Conclusion. More with my friend Stephanie Arnold. Okay, talk to us about, again, I'm not even doing fancy intros because this story, I just want to get to it. talk to us about the regression therapy.
So I do the therapy, and at one point, after hours and hours of therapy, the therapist under hypnosis, I go into the operating room, and then I see the first crash cart didn't work, but the second crash cart did. I see that my anesthesiologist is down by my feet, not by my head. I see who hits the button for the code. I see which nurse jumps on my chest and gives me CPR. I see that my own doctor didn't deliver the baby. I see what happens down the hall where the nurse's break room is. I see what my daughter is doing with the nanny. I see all of it. So
I told you.
So I'm like, all right. So my husband takes a look at it, and obviously it's very graphic. And he's like, how do you know? He's like, how do you know this isn't a recalled episode of Grey's Anatomy in your head?
Okay. Don't you love the audience? I know.
I was the exact same way.
They're so good. I love the audience.
I was the exact same way.
Yes.
Cue the audience. Yeah. I called my husband a lot of names.
Yes.
So I go in, and I said, it's a fair point. Right? So
Yes.
I called my therapist. I said, how do you know what I'm telling you is the truth? And she says, well, sometimes the only truth we get is that the patient feels better. I said, that's not good enough for me.
Yeah.
I have witnesses. So I take the tapes and I go back to the hospital and I meet with the doctors who are present.
This is my favorite part.
You want to go to break?
No, I don't. Are you kidding me?
Okay, so I take the tapes, and Jonathan now at this point is like, I'm going with you. I want to hear everything in the same moment. So the doctor's like, I do not know how you know what you know, but it's impossible for you to know what you're telling us. And there's a curtain in front of your face, so you couldn't see what's happening down here. And by the way, when you're clinically dead and we intubate you to resuscitate, your eyes are taped shut. So I'll give you that the brain is shutting down and your hearing is the last to go, but you most certainly cannot see. So the doctor's like, it is accurate down to the crash cart, this one, just everything. And then when we were walking back the hallway, this nurse comes up to me and says, Mrs. Arnold, I know you don't know who I am. I said, you're the nurse who did CPR on me and broke my ribs. And she told me later she ran back to her office and broke down crying because I shouldn't know this information. So, and then the kicker was, I told Jonathan, I said, Julie didn't deliver the baby. And he's like, well, how do you know that? I said, I saw it in my therapy. He's like, oh, okay. And so we go back and he's standing there. I said, Julie, did you deliver the baby? And she said, no. And I knew exactly who delivered the baby because it was the resident that was sitting with us in the gyn-onc office when I went to talk about my hysterectomy, a specialist. And he's like, why would that person be? I said, did this person deliver the baby? And she said, how do you know that?
Amazing. So fast forwarding, one of the reasons you're here, so I asked you this that night, are you still getting these visions? And if you are visions or whatever you want to call them, how are you using them now?
I still get premonitions, I still get visions, and my intuition is at an all-time high. So I had a little bit of it on low voltage as a kid, then I go asystolic, which means no electricity running through the body, and now I'm on high voltage. So what I do now is I trust it more. I tell everybody to trust your intuition at a level that you don't think will help, but ultimately it's what saved my life. So if you sense something, you need to say something. I speak at a lot of medical conferences. I'm here in Minnesota today because of a nurse convention with obstetrics. And my goal is that when you have caregivers, clinicians, and you as patients learn to speak up and not be intimidated because everybody's telling you no. And from a medical perspective, that the doctors, the nurses, the clinicians will start listening differently. Because just because you can't see this other vibration, what intuition is, doesn't mean it doesn't exist.
It's just unbelievable. And the reaction, when Stephanie tells the story and the reaction to people, and it's just amazing. So if people want to see, we showed you a little bit of the video, to get the book, to get in contact with you, where do they go? The
book is everywhere. You can get it on Amazon. You can get it wherever books are sold. You can look on my website, stephaniearnold.net. You can find me on Instagram at stepharnold37 or on Facebook. I'm stalking Jason right now. And
I stalk her. Yeah. She was on Megyn Kelly, and I was like, look, she's on Megyn Kelly. I'm so excited for her. Yeah.
And so, you can reach out. I'm very responsive, especially when people are going through difficult transitions in their life, and they have intuitive thoughts and they just need the validation. I wish somebody was there to do that for me, because when I was looking up and trying to find somebody who had similar symptoms that I did, it didn't exist. So now that I'm talking about it, more and more people are sharing their own personal stories about what's happened to them and how it's changing their lives.
If you want to get the book, as Stephanie said, go to wherever books are sold. Go to Amazon.com. The book is 37 seconds. My friend is Stephanie Arnold. And if you missed any of this, don't worry. We're going to post all of these segments on our Facebook page. Share it. And like Stephanie said, she's very responsive. You can get a hold of her. One more time for my friend, Stephanie Arnold, everybody.